I'm Mark Tewksbury. I'm proud to be your host of eGals in Your Corner. I like to say that I won the 100-meter backstroke in Barcelona in 1992 at the Olympics. I won the 100-meter backstroke at the first World Out Games in Montreal in 2006. And I believe in inclusion in sport. I'm past chair of Special Olympics, which is providing community for people with intellectual disability through sport. And I'm also a director of the Canadian Olympic Committee, and we're taking these issues very seriously. So welcome to In Your Corner. It's a weekly virtual series on LGBTQI2S inclusion in sport and the effects of COVID-19 on sports communities. Please head to egal.ca in your corner to catch some past episodes. We're on number 9 already. I can hardly believe it. So there's lots of great shows to catch up on. The series finale next week will be on December 2nd. So come, please join us. We've got a really fun show. We're going to check in with some past guests and have some new content as well. Tonight is really exciting for me. It's about coaching and LGBTQI2S inclusion. And I just want to say first, a huge shout out. You know, so many of us Olympians have an amazing experience and we win medals or whatever happens. And our coaches are kind of the unsung heroes. And I had a stream of incredible coaches all the way through my career, including my swimming coach, Derek Snelling. It was really, though, working with Debbie Muir, a synchronized swimming coach, the final year of my career, where I had a coach that created the environment where I really felt I could be completely authentically myself. And at that time, I was a closeted gay person. It was 1992. It was a very different environment in the globe. It was actually 1991. And somehow through this friendship with the coach and this trust relationship, I could share my truth. And I had to do the unthinkable, make a 7-year improvement in 10 months to win the Olympics and bring everything inside me to that. And I just knew I couldn't do it if I was fighting inside. And having that one ally, that coach that I could speak to create that space was a game changer. I don't think I would have won the Olympics without that experience. I'm still in business with Debbie today. That's how impactful that relationship was. But I'd really like to explore the importance of LGBTQI2S inclusion from the coaching perspective with our 2 guests tonight. We're joined by Lorraine Lafreniere and David Thibodeau, and I'll just give them both a formal introduction before bringing them on. So Lorraine Lafreniere, she's CEO of the Canadian Association of Canada. Lorraine leads Canada's Coaching Education Partnership with the National Coaching Certification Program, as well as safe sport initiatives with the profession of coaching and the responsible coaching movement. Her career spans more than 30 years within the national sports system, which includes roles as CEO of Canoe Kayak Canada, as well as Cycling Canada. Lorraine is the mother of 2 and is a proud cancer survivor. She's an advocacy of resiliency in all facets of life. And I have to come clean, she's a dear longtime friend. Please welcome Lorraine Lafreniere. Yay! Hi, Lorraine. It's great to see you. I'm just going to get David and we'll be right back, okay? Next up is David Thibodeau. And David, I also have a bias for. He's a former competitive swimmer competing at the Canada Games in 2013 for Team New Brunswick. He's now in his 10th year of coaching. He's coached different levels and is currently coaching ages 9 to 11. David is passionate about LGBTQI2S inclusion in sports and the positive social impact that sport can have on society. He was also selected as a young sport maker for Global Sports Week in Paris in February 2020. He's really a bright light in terms of advocacy and programming and being a spokesperson. Please welcome David Thibodeau. Yay!
Hello.
Hi, David. So I'm so happy to have you both on this show. And it's an obvious question, but I want to hear it from people who are passionate about coaching. Why is the role of a coach so important, especially when we're talking about issues of diversity and inclusion? Lorraine, I'm going to throw it to you first.
Oh, Mark, this is such a good question. You know, the coach is responsible for the optimal person development. So that's the whole person. That's a shared responsibility, obviously, and with the athlete or the participant and the family and the environment, and that is how they come to support evolution. You talked about Debbie and the pivotal role she played. Well, we need more Debbies in this world.
We sure do. David, I think you're a Debbie actually. So talk to me about your passion for coaching is fantastic. You're a competitive swimmer. You started coaching while you were still swimming, and now you're coaching young people. Share with me why you think this is so important.
Well, I think, coaches are so important for setting the tone and the culture of, not just a team, but I guess, sports in a broader sense. Especially, there's been a large focus on getting more women in sport in coaching and Indigenous people in coaching. And, I think that, focusing on getting more people, LGBTQI2S people in coaching, the whole culture will change and it will become more inclusive and more people will want to participate in sports. It'll become a safer space for everybody. I think that's a really important way that coaches have an impact on just like the tone and culture of sports in general. Coaches are also role models for a lot of athletes, especially the younger athletes. Oh, there's me at Canada Games. I was with my friend. We were right at the front. Awesome. But coaches are role models, and hopefully that me living my true self, being out at the pool, hopefully I help young athletes feel that they can see themselves in sport, and that they can see themselves in the long term in sport.
Representation is so huge, David. 100%. I mean, it's why I chose to come out. It would have been really easy not to talk about such private things, but I think at some point you think, okay, it's important that people know. Lorraine, as people are becoming more conscious of culture and of issues of diversity and inclusion, it's a sensitive thing. And historically, I think the coaching world has been a little bit more male dominated. So that's just a shift in all kinds of things for this culture of coaches.
Oh, it really is. And we got a lot of work to do. I think, we're really trying to help with the training of our coaches in understanding inclusivity and respect. And we're trying to create tools to help our coaches, quite frankly, evolve. There are great coaches and shining examples out there. And, David, we have one here. And so I think our job is to help what I call the transformation of the leadership role of coaches. And that, really starts with checking your own biases and presumptions and building an inclusive and explicitly inclusive environment. And that's where we have to do our work. And I think, Mark, that tone setting is really the art of coaching, along with the practical, applied, intentional, explicit language, tone setting, safe space that coaches need to set at the beginning of any season, any camp, any group. And really, that's where we need to help and change that work, regardless of coaching.
Yeah, well said. I mean, it's just like leadership. There's an art and a science of leadership. There's a technical piece, but there's an intuitive tone setting, feeling the environment, knowing what to say when, that's equally as important. I do give a lot of credit to the sports system for we're trying. I remember in 2017, David, you would have loved to have been there. It was in Calgary, an Olympic committee meeting, and a gal came in and did kind of an education on the language of LGBTQI2S, which, there's many acronyms. And Lorraine, were you there at that session when it was all the sport? It was all the sport leaders, and it was one of the COC November meetings. You must have been conflicted somehow, and lots of sport leadership, and all of us we did this workshop. There's 600 leaders, and EGAL's going, G stands for it. Everyone goes gay. L stands for lesbian, and we've got like the head of judo and boxing, and I was like, wow, pinch me. Like, is this really happening? So we're making strides, but there's a long way to go. And on that note, I just love to ask David, you're coaching through COVID. So what is that looking like for you?
Yeah, it's definitely it's definitely different. We're not practicing nearly as much. But something that I really value as a coach is getting to know the kids and getting to know them personally. I think making them feel valued as people is very important. And I think that for me personally, I want them to feel valued, and not just as swimmers and athletes, but just as people, because they have their own, they have their own ideas. They are original people. So I coach, younger kids. I coach 9, 10, 11, 12-year-olds. And, this year, definitely, I can't get to know them as well this year because, we don't have any informal chat time before or after practice. We're all wearing masks. We have to social distance for 2 meters apart. We show up at the pool, we get in, and then we get out and go home. So that aspect is really lagging for me this year. But it's, I try my hardest to make sure I'm always asking them, how their day was at school, how their weekend, like, what are they doing, things that they're working on. But that's definitely a struggle this year.
Well, I hear you, Lorraine. I loved your sport leadership conference. It was phenomenal, but I missed all the networking and all the corners I even said to the guys when we wanted you on the show, I said, geez, I would have just asked Lorraine in person if I'd seen her, like in usual life, right? So it's a big adjustment. And I mean, the other big factor, and I think it's had a big impact on sport as well, has been the Black Lives Matter movement. Lorraine, talk to me about how that's impacted the Coaching Association.
It's 2020 has had so many tragedies, from Nova Scotia to COVID to Black Lives Matters. And I think that psychology has really weighed on everyone. But the trauma of the incidents, the repeated, not new Black Lives Matters of this summer really shook us and, quite frankly, me to the core. I can tell you the day after George Floyd's traumatic death, I had a conversation with a colleague who is Black, who the trauma in that conversation that I had with that person, I will never forget for my entire life. And I walked away saying, in the interests of this individual and for BIPOC across the country, we need to equip our coaches to understand where people are coming from. And so we've really started we have a task force. We've started on training. We're doing diversity training. We're looking at how we can integrate it into our coaching education, definitely getting into mental health and well-being. Some of the conversations that I've had with Black coaches, so Mark Smith, phenomenal women's national team softball coach, has guided me so much with his Black coaching experience. Owen Dawkins from U of A, wrestling coach who's had so many experiences, has opened up a bit with us and has opened up publicly in the media about the experience of being a Black coach, which is yet another minority group. So there's so many facets to this, Mark, and it's unpacking and peeling back one layer at a time. And there are times where I think, where do we start? But it's the analogy of one starfish at a time, and creating change.
How do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? But you know what, Lorraine, I'm so heartened to hear you, like, where you're starting is listening to people's experience. That's the best place to start. And I'm really encouraged that you're the head of the CAC right now. I really am. You've done so much good work in respect in sport, and you're so resilient. David, we need to be informed about the experience of a Black coach. I'm wondering, you're not a gay coach, you're a coach who is gay. But how does being gay inform and shape your coaching?
So, I mean, for me as a coach who is gay or gay coach, either way, I'm both. This is a kind of a hard question to answer because, obviously I've been very lucky as well as you, Mark. I've had a lot of great coaches over the years, and, I like to credit them, for making me the coach that I am today. But I think that maybe my experience as a career coach, has made me more in tune with the group dynamic. A while ago, I was talking to this other coach about this conference that they had gone to with their provincial sport organization, and they went to this session that was about group dynamics. And in the session, they were talking about how boys should be kept with the boys as much as because at swimming, boys and girls practice together, unlike a lot of other sports. But boys and girls should be tried to kept together as much as possible. Girls should have boy lane, girl lane, boy things like that. And I was sitting there listening to that, and I was just like, why? Like when I was growing up, I hated that. I in gym class, boys versus girls dodgeball, and sometimes in practice, boys versus girl relays. The battle of the sexes. That was not particularly fun for me. I never wanted to be on the boys team, and I know after the fact, I've talked to several of my former teammates and people that I went to school with. It's not just LGBTQ people who didn't enjoy that. I know straight people who also didn't enjoy that. And I think this is a very old way of thinking that boys and girls apparently can't mix and they can't be friends, and that's kind of ridiculous to me. So that's something that I think feeds into my coaching a lot. I try not to do that as much as possible. I think touching a little bit about on my experience as a gay coach. Mark, I'm sure you've experienced this before in your life as well, but every day you have to decide if you're going to come, if you're going to be out, right? You say, this is my boyfriend, or this is just my friend. And especially for the ages that I coach, from 9 to 12, this age they're really starting to realize what relationships are. So I get asked all the time if I have a girlfriend, and what do I just say no, or do I say no but I have a boyfriend? How would their parents react? I just don't know.
Yeah.
So it's something that I struggle with a bit.
Yeah, I mean, that is hugely complex, David, and I completely understand it, because you want your own integrity to be who you are and authentic, and yet you're respecting the experience of your athletes. Because I have to say, when I was chef de mission, I was an openly gay person. I was super proud, but I was also very respectful of how my relationship was vis-a-vis the team, because I didn't know what some athletes believed, and it wasn't my place to impose my life on their experience. So it's a balance. That's a really excellent point that you raise. And so you feel good about how you're showing up. I mean, that's really what counts at the end of the day. You feel good how you're navigating the situation?
I sometimes depending on the situation and depending on the age of the kid, some of the older kids I'm, more open with. But as a team as a whole, we try to talk about inclusion. 2 years ago, last year was cut short, but 2 years ago, I actually reached out to the Canadian Olympic Committee and asked for some of their one team shoelaces. And so I got one for every single person every single athlete on our team. So 130 shoelaces. And, we took 5 minutes at the beginning of each practice and just, sat down and talked about inclusion, just in general, not necessarily, about me, but just, inclusion. And, I think that's important, just for setting the tone of the team. We were talking about it a little bit earlier, what's the point, in my head, what's the point of waiting for there to be a problem, right? Address it beforehand, make it the standard from the beginning.
Yeah, and set the tone. I mean, it doesn't become a problem because you've made it not a problem. Boy, Lorraine, how inspired are you listening to David talk about all the things he's doing?
Yeah.
And there's so much to unpack there. Like, how many coaches do you think it's important to represent, and yet how many coaches have to remain closeted?
Oh my goodness. I mean, I just kind of listening to David, and, Mark, you talked about, we've known each other for 30 some years, right? So I've watched your journey as well. I mean, I think, if you just think about some of the data, so one of the guides that we have leading the way, which is on the coach.ca website, to help coaches manage and navigate these environments. Basically some data that came out in the fields in 2015 said that a lot of participants believe that there's still a lot of homophobia in sport, and so how do I even begin to answer that question with statistics that talk about homophobia in sport.
Yeah.
It's really,
Yeah.
we don't have that true data because of that stigma. And I think it's with people like David who set that tone that has created and will create change, just as you have in the athlete advocacy and leadership side. So it's a puzzle, eh? It's a puzzle to figure that one out. But what we know is by providing the tools, setting the tone for training, working on inclusive language, changing our education material so that it's inclusive language. It's not he, she, it's they. All of those steps, all of that imagery, all of those shift and transformational thinking that we can influence our coaches with will only help in the long term. So we don't have the data. We know we're all part of the same community, but there's still part of the community that doesn't feel that the égal.
Yeah. What about some bright lights? Let's look at the positive. David, do you have any role models? Anybody that inspires you as an out gay coach? Or are you it? Are you the one that's going to inspire everyone after?
Honestly, when my experience as an athlete, I'm going to go back to talking about an athlete for a little bit. So I graduated from university in 2018, and I graduated from high school in 2013. So it's been, a couple of years since I've been out of high school and university. So, obviously I think, the atmosphere has changed a lot. There are some athletes on my team now that, are doing things at the pool that I never would have dared to do. But, when I was an athlete,
what are we talking about, David? Like feather boas and no, I'm just teasing. I'm kidding. I couldn't resist a little light.
Feather boas at the pool. They make it, the feathers wouldn't mix well with water, I don't think. But when I was growing up, there were very few out athletes that I knew of. And, so when I got into university and, I was exploring more, university is a big time when people, explore more about what they want to do for the rest of their lives, and they learn a lot about themselves. My first universities, I was, discovering who I was, and I ended up coming out at the end of my second year of university. And I didn't think who I was becoming was compatible with who I was. So I actually ended up quitting my sport for a year or two, a year and a half, until I was able to, fortunately I was able to get back into it in my master's degree. But I did have that experience that I had to, I felt like I had to quit because I couldn't see myself in sport. I think there's a lot more role models in athletes out there now. I think there's a lot more out athletes. Eric Radford just won gold medal in 2018. In terms of coaches, they're really, as far as I know, I don't know that many outspoken out coaches out there right now.
Well, wow. Okay, so first of all, how much more remarkable is it that you decided to become a coach after that experience? You could have easily walked away from sport forever after feeling not included. So amazing to come back and create that inclusive space. Lorraine, we got to work on this. We got to get some more role models out there because we know some, but we maybe need to promote the story a little bit more and amplify it because they're out there. And David, you're a great young example of that, but there's some more senior members of this coaching squad that I think it's time.
Well, it's so funny. We do have the Canadian Journal of Women in Coaching, and we have explored research with like Guylaine Demers, who's a leader in the field, Jennifer Birch-Jones, who have done great work and done some data on LGBTQ2IS athletes and coaches. So we do have some of that reading in there, but there's a lot more work that needs to be done. And it's kind of a funny thing. I know you and I can think of a few coaches, and I want it to come from their voice.
Exactly. Me too. That's it. Well, look at you. You're you are so great, Lorraine, as the head of the Coaching Association of Canada. Truly. What can we do? Just sort of final thoughts. How can we make this whole situation a little bit better? How can coaches be more LGBTQI2S inclusive minded? What are some things to watch out for? I think, Lorraine, you mentioned a great one of thinking about the language that you're using, which is really easy to fall into the trap of. Any other tips for creating more inclusive environments?
Yeah. So for sure in the training, we are working through making sure the diversity and inclusion language is intentional and that we address LGBTQ2IS as well. But the Leading the Way manual is a really good tool that educates and provides tools and resources for coaches to use in a way that sets a tone intentionally up front. And so there's kind of like a top 10 list in there that really talks about, understanding your own beliefs. Make sure you describe what's acceptable and inclusive at the beginning of a season. Act quickly when you see something that is unacceptable. Be careful if you're an international coach that, where you travel to, and think of the safety of athletes. Assume your athletes include LGBTQIS athletes. We are. So therefore, it's not I will find out and then I'll do something. No, it's upfront. It's the development of everybody. Be visible in your support and your language and your tone. David, it's the things that you say as well as the way you behave in that tone that you're setting and the way you're thinking so thoughtfully about your young athletes. As boring and bureaucratic as it is, does the organization have the right policy? Does it have the right framework? Do you have abuse and harassment policies? Because sometimes it's that side of the equation. It's not related to, it's the safety of the person, regardless of anything, right? And so making sure all of that is in place and making sure there's training available, because we really do need to take on the responsibility to educate. And, I really feel like the word transform, it's transform people's beliefs. I don't like the word change, because change has that certain negative connotation. It's transforming our beliefs. And therefore transforming sport into what it should be. But there's lots of tools and resources on coach.ca, Mark, that we should have that as a link, and we can share. And championing stories, as you say.
Yeah, wow. That was a very thorough list of what we can do. That was amazing, Lorraine. David, why don't you just follow that? Come up with your list of top 10.
Okay, well,
go ahead.
Trying to be visible. I'm wearing my Canada Games Pride shirt right now. So try to be as visible as you can. Definitely, if you're a coach, take steps to be more visible in your life. If you are LGBTQI2S. I think it's important to make education accessible for coaches. Right now, some of the resources out there are lengthy. They're 30 plus pages, and even for someone like me who's passionate about inclusion in sport, and I like to think that I'm at least somewhat educated in inclusion in sport. 30 pages is really dense for someone like me to get through. So when I was working with Coach New Brunswick, I think a year or two ago, when we were developing Coach New Brunswick's hand guide for coaches for working with LGBTQ athletes, right from the beginning, we made it a priority to make it as short as possible and make it as simple as possible. I think in total it's 12 pages, and that's including the title page and the additional resources at the end. So maybe it's like 9 pages, but that makes it more accessible and easily understandable for a lot of coaches who don't know where to start. They don't know it's like make the list of things that Lorraine just said very easy to find. I think making things accessible is very, very important for making inclusion education more broadly known.
That was beautifully dovetail into Lorraine's, because policy can be so onerous. So if you make it a 12-page document that's easy to get through, it's much more likely to get applied. You both have been so terrific. Thank you for giving some insight into the coaching perspective on inclusion in sport. It's really wonderful to have this on week 9. I like to end each show with people at home listening and with us kind of summarizing our experience in a word. And I know that puts you on the spot, and I'm going to start just to buy you guys 5 extra seconds. So I'm going to say my work is, I'm torn because I want to say maverick for you, David, but I think it's more evolution because it's transformative from Lorraine and it evolves people. But I feel like we're evolving from the coach to the athlete, or from the athlete to the coach with you, which is so exciting to see. Lorraine, I'm going to put you on the spot. What's your word?
Well, I feel like I like the word transform because
Yeah.
I can't help but think of my own journey, and I think, you know, the time and space to allow from infancy to adulthood, when you get to create your own perceptions and views and educate yourself when you leave the nest, depending on what home you grow up in. And you know, that's the privilege of adulthood, is actually transforming yourself. So that's where I'm going to stick.
Beautiful. David, final word to you.
I think for me,
sorry.
I think that's Lorraine and I.
Yes, so Mark, that was my little surprise. So sorry, David. So the bottom picture that's being held is Mark and I in 1992 at the closing Olympic Village party. And then the above photo is us recreating the moment in 2012 at the
2012.
London Olympics.
Wow,
that's wonderful.
sorry.
That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Wow.
Apologies, David.
That's awesome.
Okay, David. Wow, over to you. My word is shocked now, but over to you, David.
I would say my word is uplifted. I think, you know, the conversation we just had was extremely uplifting, I think, for, you know, talking about the important role that coaches have, from that all the way to, you know, I don't think I've really been able to share my experience, or, you know, necessarily being asked to share my experience about, as, you know, being a gay coach. You know, so, you know, I like, you know, being recognized, being uplifted in that way, I think, yeah, I think that's how I'm feeling.
Wow. Well, that is the best way we could have a guest feeling. And a shout out to our producers behind the scene, Jonathan and Dennis, who made sure that you were on the show, David. And great choice. We're so glad to have given you a platform. Lorraine, take care of people like David, okay? Make sure there's 100 more of them in 10 years to come. You guys, thanks so much. That was amazing. Thanks for being part of episode 9.
Thank you.
Wow. Sometimes this show is so surprising for me. David was so inspiring to hear his experience, and it was different than what I was expecting. So what a brave and inspiring individual. So listen, be sure to check out egal.ca in your corner for past episodes. Thanks again to David Thibodeau and Lorraine Lafreniere from the Coaching Association of Canada. Next week is our last episode of this current incarnation. So we'll make sure to see us a week from tonight. Until then, I'm Mark Tewksbury in your corner.